Kia ora koutou, my name is Tandia and I'm a composter and farmer here at the Edible Earth Urban Farm in Cannons Creek, Porirua. We're a small-scale regenerative market garden, and here we do some small-scale composting as well as growing a huge variety of seasonal vegetables and herbs. Edible Earth works in partnership with WELLfed, who offer free cooking classes to the local community. So today we're going to be doing a seed starting workshop, and that is basically just starting your own vegetables from seed as opposed to growing them as small seedlings that you might buy in a hardware shop. So starting produce from seed is really cool because not only does it save you the cost of buying seedlings, but it's just also really exciting to watch something grow right from being a tiny seed into a plant, which you will then turn into vegetables in your garden. So there are a few materials that you need when you're starting seeds, all which are pretty basic and can be found at your local hardware shop or somewhere like the warehouse at pretty low cost. So I'll just run through some of the things you might need. First of all, you're going to need some kind of tray. So you can start seedlings in any kind of tray that has some drainage or holes in the bottom of it. And often I will just use a recycled seedling tray from seedlings I've already bought from a place like Bunnings. So you might have some of these lying around at your house which are empty and they're really great to use. Otherwise, some other things that you might have lying around at home, something like egg carton shells, and those are also just a really easy thing you can reuse, and you'll just want to make sure you poke some holes in the bottom of those so that they can drain properly. If you don't have egg cartons or reusable seedling trays, anything else that has kind of a plastic bottom, you can use the bottom of a milk carton or another kind of bottle and just make sure that you poke some holes in the bottom so that there's drainage. So once you've got your container, the other important thing you're going to need is some seed starting mix. So here I have a couple different examples of ones that you can buy at Bunnings. This is an organic seed starting mix. And this is just a regular seed starting mix. Both can be bought for about $5 or $6. And what's important about these mixes is that they are a special combination of nutrients which will help your seedlings get a really good head start in life. So a common mistake people will make is they'll just go into their garden and take out regular soil from anywhere in their garden, dig it up and put it straight into their tray. But that kind of soil from your garden just doesn't contain all the right nutrients to help seedlings get a head start in life. So you'll need something that's specifically called a seed mix or a seed raising mix, and that will help your seedlings grow. So once you've got your trays and your seed raising mix, you obviously need your seeds. And again, these can be bought at any hardware store. There's a million different seeds you can buy, and they all come in different shapes and sizes. So here I've got basil, which is a really tiny seed. I've got some beans, and these are another type of bean which are a bit bigger. Some things to note about seeds, they do all come in different shapes and sizes, and that's really important when we get on to putting your seeds into the soil, because depending on how big a seed is, that will make a difference as to how deep you plant it into the soil. The other important thing to note about seeds is they are all seasonal. So not all seeds grow at all times throughout the year. Some are for summer crops, some are for winter crops, and typically it will say on the back of your seed packet when something likes to be grown. So at the moment we're kind of heading towards the end of spring, start of summer, so I'll be choosing things that we would grow during that season. Okay, so now I'm just going to go through a simple demonstration on how you will start your seeds using all the ingredients that we've talked about. So you're going to take your tray and fill it up with your seed raising mix. It's a little bit messy, so you might want to do this outside somewhere. Give it a good pat down on the table to kind of help it all sink to the bottom, and then give it a light press down with your fingers, so that will just help the seedlings grow in nice little compact shapes and so that they won't fall apart. So have it all compact like that. Then what you're going to want to do is take some kind of maybe a pen or another type of stick. Here I just have a old popsicle stick, so that you can make a wee hole in the top of each cell. So make a little circle, and that's where you're going to put your seed. So once you've done that, you'll take your seed, and the first one I'll use is an example of a bigger seed. So this is a climbing bean, and this is probably about as big as some seeds will get. So that's what your seed looks like, and it's really important to take note of how big that is, because how deep you're going to want to bury this in your soil is double the height of the bean. So this bean's about this big, so it means we're going to want to bury it 2 times that depth into the soil. So you're going to pop it into your hole and push it right down nearly to the bottom for that kind of height bean, because it's pretty big. Cover it back up with soil. Might want to add a little bit more on top. And again, just give it a nice little pat down to make sure it's in there nice and firm. Now, if we were to have a basil seed, for example, these are much, much smaller. So, I don't know if you can see that, but they're very, very tiny. So that means you're going to want to bury them right near the surface of the soil. So only 2 times the size of the seed, so that will only be maybe half a centimetre below the surface of the soil. So you're just going to want to lightly drop that in right to the top. And with smaller seeds, you can put a couple in there because they don't take up as much space to grow. So I might put 1 or 2 in there. Again, bury it. Put a little bit more soil on top and just pack it down. So you can fill up all your seed trays. You can do them with all different seeds or all the same. One really handy thing I like to do is just make a note of which seed I planted on a popsicle stick, and you can put it in that tray so that you remember once it starts to grow what you're growing in that cell. So once you've filled up all your seed trays, you're going to want to give it a really good water. I give it a little bit of water and then I wait for that to kind of sink in, absorb, and do a little bit more. So when seedlings are first starting out in their life, they like to be kept really, really moist, so it's important that you fully soak all the seeds, make sure there's plenty of water in there. And then you're ready to go. Those are your seedlings. Right, so once you've got your seedlings in their seed trays and they've been nice and watered, it's important to put them in a really nice, warm, sunny place to enable them to grow. So for any seedling to get a good start in life, there's a couple of things that are really important that they need: warmth, light, air, and water. So when seedlings are really, really new and they've just been put into the soil, they're going to want to be kept really, really warm for the first part of their life. So the first 5 to 10 days, you're going to want to make sure that they're being placed in a really warm, sunny spot inside your house, ideally say a north-facing window or somewhere where they'll get at least 12 hours of sunlight every single day. An important thing to remember is that all different seeds take a different amount of time to germinate. So that means the time it'll take before the seed we've buried in there pops its head above the soil. Some seeds will germinate in about 3 or 4 days, others might take about 9 to 10. So you've just got to be patient. Different things will come up at different rates, and just keep an eye out for when they do pop their head above the soil. So putting it in a really warm, sunny spot is really important. Also having it in a spot where there's plenty of air circulation is another really important thing. So a common issue that you can run into with seedlings is what's called dampening off. And that's when a seedling is really, really moist and it doesn't get enough airflow and it starts to kind of just rot. So it's too wet, it's too sodden, and there's not enough air around it. So you just want to put it, say, again, on a windowsill where there's a bit of airflow around, in a nice open room, somewhere where it's really warm and sunny. When it comes to watering your seedlings, you have to be careful not to underwater them or overwater them. So it's a bit of a science as to how much to water. A good rule of thumb is using something like a watering can or perhaps a spray can. A kind of mist or a light sprinkling of water does them a lot better than just getting, for example, putting them under a tap or something which has a really strong stream of water all at once. It can kind of tend to flood them. So if you're using something like a watering can or a spray can, I would suggest watering them once a day. A light watering each morning will be plenty. You'll be able to tell if your seedlings are drying out because this top surface will start to look dry and crumbly. Then you can just start giving them a little bit more water each day, but typically once a day will be plenty. So here I have some examples of seedlings which have just begun to germinate and ones which are a bit further through their life. So you can see once they've started to germinate, the little green heads pop above the soil. And at this point, an important thing to note is that when you're watering your seedlings, you want to try water them around the base of the soil. So rather than watering them right on top of the green leaves, because that can tend to burn them when they're left in the sun, you want to just water right into the base of the soil and keep that nice and moist there. This is an example of a seedling which is a lot further on in its life, so it's probably about 3 weeks old. And at this point you've got several leaves per each head, and they're probably almost ready to go into the soil. So the next step is keeping an eye on your seedlings and knowing when to take them out of the seedling tray and put them into a pot or straight into your garden, depending on whatever you're wanting to do. A good rule of thumb for determining when a seedling is ready to go into the garden, I've got a few more examples here. You just want it to have a stem which looks nice and strong enough to withstand the outside elements. So something which isn't going to flip over in the wind, isn't going to snap, it's not too fine and wobbly. You can see here both of these seedlings have a pretty good thick stem on them. They're doing okay in the wind, they're not going to fall over, they'll be strong enough to go outside. So just keep an eye on your seedlings. Different things will grow at different rates. Here's another example of one which is a bit longer. And again, this is probably ready to go into the ground, looks pretty sturdy. But your plants don't need to be massive. They don't need to be huge or flowering, or certainly not have any kind of fruit on them before they can go into the ground. You want to get them into their final resting place before that happens so that they can grow once they're in that final spot. So when it comes to transplanting your seedlings, which is moving them out of their trays and putting them into the pot or the planter box which you're going to be growing them in, one thing that you should do before you do that is what we call hardening them off. So when a seedling has been raised inside, it's always really sheltered, it doesn't have any wind around it doesn't get rained on, it's in a really protected space. So when you go to transfer outside, it's suddenly going to get a real shock by all the elements. So a good thing to practice doing is, instead of just putting your seedlings straight outside and into the ground, start moving them outside for a few hours a day for a couple days before you put them outside for good. So I would take the seedling tray and I would put it somewhere like the front porch of my house or out on a step somewhere, and maybe put it down there for 5 or so hours the first day and then bring it back inside at night. Then the next day I might put it out for 10 or so hours and then I bring it back inside at night. And then on the third day it's probably ready to go into its final spot, so you can bring it outside and pop it out to put it in its final spot. So when you're taking a seedling out of the tray, you're just going to want to lightly press on the bottom of the tray to loosen the seedling a little bit. And then you should just be able to tip the tray and it will fall out. So ideally this is kind of what your seedling will look like. You'll be able to see some good root formation. It'll be holding together on its own pretty well, not entirely falling apart. And that's when you know that it's ready to go into the soil. Okay, so let's go and plant this in the ground and I'll show you how that is done. Okay, so when you're transplanting your seedlings, taking them out of the seedling tray and putting them into the ground, you're just going to want to create a little hole, and you can do this in your planter box or tub or straight into the garden, wherever you're putting your seed. Dig a little hole that's about the depth of the seedling. And then apply some pressure onto the bottom to pop it out. Hopefully it should hold together pretty well. And then you're just going to place your seedling into the hole and try to keep the top of it about in line with the top of the soil. So you don't want to bury it too deep or have it so that it's sticking out on the top. You want to have them right in line. Bring the soil back around and just give it a good bit of pressure. Make sure that it's in there nice and firm. And then that's that. Add a little water and it should be good to go. So I hope you've enjoyed the seed starting workshop and you're inspired to get home into your own garden and start growing some of your own vegetables from seed. It's a really exciting and rewarding process, and spring and summer are great months to get into it because there's a great abundance of interesting things to grow. You can check online on the Porirua Library website for some free seed collection packets. We'll be sending out a different variety of seeds. You can go pick them up and then follow through with this workshop and watch how to start them. And if you're inspired to do some more gardening or have a look around the garden that we have here, we're located on Hampshire Street. Our name is Edible Earth, and you can find us on Facebook.